Hello and welcome to this week's special episode of The Debrief, where either myself or a guest joins me in debriefing on last week's interview. This time around, I am so excited to be joined by an awesome panel of guests to debrief on Simon Squibb's interview that came out last week. So if you missed that one, make sure to give it a listen before we dive in here. So to introduce today's panel, first and foremost, I'm joined by Thomas Panton, who is a force of nature. He's a serial entrepreneur, former pro athlete, and actually an early strategy and tragedy interview guest himself. So I highly recommend scrolling right back and queuing up episode 6 to listen to my interview with Thomas there. Next up, we have Danielle Wallington, the founder of Flock Here, a social app that connects women who work from home to places to work from and people to work with, described as a combination of booking.com and Tinder for co-workers. And last but not least, we have Cosmin Golache, an early stage entrepreneur and founder of Waiterful, a platform connecting diners and waiters. All right, without further ado, let's dive in. Open question to all of you. What resonated the most with the interview I did with Simon Squibb? What were the key things that really stood out to any of you?
Lots to dig into on this podcast. Thanks for having me. I think overall it was really just interesting to hear you sort of question and challenge him on some things. But what resonated with me the most was definitely his sort of, I guess, story of hard times make you better or stronger.
One of my favorite stories is the story of two young men, two boys that are born into a family where their father is a drunk. And one grows up to be really successful and the other grows up to be a drunk. And there was a documentary done on them. Why was one successful and why was one a failure? Why was one a drunk? And they were both asked the same question. Why do you think you are where you are today? And the one that is a drunk said, well, I'm here today because my father is an alcoholic. And the one that's really successful was asked, why are you here today? And he said, I'm here today because my father was an alcoholic.
It's such a classic statement, but having sort of myself experience being unable to pay rent and living in a van whilst at university, it definitely gives you grit that people don't really understand unless they've been through that sort of challenging financial time. And I think that is super, super interesting that he brings that to the work that he does. But what sort of drives his passion is his personal experience through that as well.
Yeah, just sticking with that for a second, I feel like there's almost two ways we could deep dive into that. Like one is on a practical level. I think he said something around like if you don't have anything, you haven't got anything to lose. So it's almost in a very unexpected way, it kind of makes it easier to take those risks because it's like, well, how much worse can it get? But then on a more psychological level, I guess, is the grit as you describe, and just that kind of nothing's handed to me on a plate, I have to work for it. Having experienced similar hardship, Thomas, I'd love to get like your view on that.
Those two things are basically interconnected. I definitely agree that we have this weird perception in the sort of startup world that if you come from sort of silver spoon living, then you've gone to sort of a Ivy League university in America or a classic university here, and then you went into the financial world and became a banker, and then you had all the network and you raised loads of money, then you are like the most amazing founder, right? And you'll get the funding super easy. And obviously that usually lays with like white, straight, rich men. And I think it's just such a warped perception of what makes personally what makes a good founder. Like if a founder has gone through real hardship and has had to pull out of that and can show real life examples of just having to deal with what they've got, even if that is nothing, then there's not only more risk appetite in that person because they got nothing to lose because they've had nothing, but also like they are just more resilient to loss. I think, if you've grown up having everything and then you risk losing it all, that's a scary proposition. But if you've grown up with nothing and you risk losing it all, it's like, well, I've done that. It doesn't scare me.
Yeah.
So I think they're both sort of deeply intercalated. But I also think that, you know, it's not to say that people don't, it's all relative, right? Like everyone has their own challenges and hardships. And I think we have to be very careful, sort of contradicting myself, but you have to be very careful what you perceive as hardship sometimes. Like there are people who seem to have it all, who have gone through very difficult times. So I think sometimes it's about taking a step back, listening to the story of the person rather than assuming we know what they've been through. And I think he articulates that quite well, because you'd see him now like a multimillionaire and be like, oh, what's this guy know about it? But if you actually listen to his story, then you can be like, okay, cool, he's gone through that. Like I
I
get that.
love that so much. And it's very much, I feel like we could go on a very deep philosophical chat there around like, your perception is your own reality, right? And if you just don't have that level of, that thickness of skin or resilience, it's, different things hurt us in different ways. And it doesn't take away something from one of us. I'm going to jump over to Danielle here. I think connecting some of the great points that Thomas made there. What comes to mind for me is entrepreneurship. This is something I think about a lot. So apologies to any diehard listeners who've heard me say this a million times already, but this idea of entrepreneurship as a privilege or a necessity. And I've sort of seen it's either, having interviewed so many founders, knowing so many amazing entrepreneurs, it sort of seems to sit on either end of that very wide spectrum. I'd love to get your hot takes on that, Danielle, and just, I guess, connecting over to you with your takeaways from the Simon Squibb interview. Sorry, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, and I think from what you said there, it's like, and a lot of people within my network and the people that I know have kind of got into this because, they didn't have a choice. They weren't able to go back to their jobs after they had children. So it was a kind of, well, what have I got to lose? I'm going to take this risk. I'm actually going to go and do something myself. So from my experience, that was definitely my experience. And I think if I hadn't have gone through that, I don't know if I would have taken that risk to have left my job that I'd been at for over a decade and was very comfortable and was getting a regular income and stuff. So I think sometimes some things in life happen that make you take that jump.
Exactly.
It's circumstances out of your control.
Yeah, totally.
I think a lot of us, and I know he interviews a lot of people that, you're employed and, they're quite comfortable, but they've got this dream because they're not actually really happy in their job, but they don't want to take that risk because what's on the other side. And I think for me, the resonated a lot was that the risk taking. And I don't think I appreciated maybe how many risks I have taken.
The more risk you take, the luckier you get. It's got nothing to do with hard work. See, people are told the harder you work, the luckier you get. And we could get into conspiracy theories why that's in the subconscious of everybody, but it's not true. It's not true. I made the most amount of money when I wasn't working hard, right? I made the most amount of money when I took risk and hired other people to do certain things, right? I made the most amount of money when I worked less hard. Right. So this thing we're taught subconsciously, I don't even know where it comes from. Like the harder we work, the luckier we get. It's wrong. And I think the honest truth is the more risk you take, the luckier you get.
And that's one of the things that he struggles with. I think when he talks to people and they say, I've got this amazing dream, I want to do it, but they're just not willing to just take that risk. They've got this baggage. They've got people of humans, right? We've got all this stuff going on in our lives. So it's not as black and white sometimes. I think he's very good at kind of saying, yes, just do it. But then it's like, but then I've got this. I've got this.
We need to dive into this much more deeply. I'm so glad that you brought up that magic word there around risk. We're totally on the same wavelength. This was exactly what I was going to come on to as well. I don't think I'd managed to go deeper with Simon on this, but I think it's, I did kind of ask him to confront, the privileges that he does have. And I think we do need to be aware of, you are a cis straight white man who's made a lot of money. You've exited a business for millions of pounds, or many millions. The exact amount isn't disclosed. It does make it a lot easier to go and walk up to strangers. At the same time, we do still need someone who's kind of, 100%. For whatever reason, they've got the money, they've got the social bite or whatever, to make it easy to go and do that. You do still need someone else who's like, okay, I've done it, I've been there. It's fine. But I'm going to jump over to you as well now, Cosmin. I know that you're early stage with your venture. I'd love to get your thoughts on the risk that was involved for you. And I think, I'd love to come back to everyone as well here because there's so much to dive into, like how much easier said than done it is. And again, just connecting it back with entrepreneurship as a privilege or a necessity, sometimes whether it's through being made redundant or whatever other life situation that's forced you into, I've just got to hustle, I've just got to make something out of nothing here. But one last thing, sorry, I'll say, I know there's loads of thoughts on here, but I just had another interview just yesterday with someone talking about getting a mortgage for their house. And I know obviously Simon's very like anti-property market, and that's a whole other conversation I'm not going to go into. But when banks won't give you a mortgage because you're taking dividends versus a salary, even though you taking dividends it is almost less risky and demonstrating that you're more resourceful in the eyes of the system. So there's kind of like on an individual level, okay, I can do the inner work to increase my risk tolerance, but then there's a systemic wider level where it's like, you're not really making it easier for me either to take that leap. So, Danielle, I'll sort of get your thoughts wrapping up on that. And then Cosmin, I'd love to get kind of your take.
Yeah, that the world has, it's like you can be okay with that, but then the world hasn't caught up yet on that. We all need to like take the risk together, otherwise what's the point?
Yeah. All right, Cosmin, over to you. What was the story with launching your business? And I'd love to get your thoughts on the whole risk conversation.
Sure. The story behind it, I think somehow came naturally. Before I used to have this job what was really I used to be really involved, and I had to do a lot of things, and I used to be an operational manager for a restaurant, and we ended up having 15 of them all around the country. I ended up traveling a lot, not having time for myself, and without being ashamed of it, I'm saying that I had a burnout. And after that burnout, I did took a couple of weeks just to refresh, to understand what would be my next steps ahead. And after that, I said, okay, might be the time now to do something for myself. As I was super involved and without taking anything from anybody, I think sometimes I used to care more about my own director about the company. I was like, now maybe it's time for me to put myself out there and to try to create something that might help others and might help myself at the same time. So it hasn't been easy. It's not easy. I will be an hypocrite saying that, maybe it's one of the hardest things what I ever done, but here we are, taking the risk, doing it. Obviously, the execution is super important and is the most important out of everything. The idea itself is brilliant, but we're still working on the execution and making sure we're doing the right thing.
Yeah. And Cosmin, I have to comment, if anyone's only listening into the audio and they're not watching on video, I have to comment on what it says on Cosmin's hoodie. It says destined for greatness. So
Yeah.
Cosmin, for you, I'd love to get your thoughts on kind of that, the inner confidence, the inner drive, that entrepreneurial itch that you're scratching versus, again, kind of how you're making it work in the real world.
Sure. In terms of that, I think nobody can prepare you for it. Somehow you have to find something in yourself to be like, do you know what? I want to do this. I'm ready for this. I will do. Because I think the most important part for me to be an entrepreneur is to be willing to do more than 100% in anything you do. Only like this, you might be able to success. If you just play by the rules and being there and trying to study and trying to learn that in A and B and C, yeah, you might succeed, but you'll still be average. I think being an entrepreneur would be like, maybe having some lack of sleep and maybe staying 2 hours extra to finish a project or a task or anything. And, and I'm sure with all of my confidence that all of this one day will pay off for sure. Has to be that way. It has to be that way.
So do you agree with everything that Simon Squibb preaches on that front?
I do agree. Also, somehow, listening to everything in during your interview has been actually super amazing and opened some parts of my brain what I didn't know I had before. Again, for not being ashamed and everything, I was always that type of person who I said, "Oh, I have built this. It's my idea. I have to own this, and it would be only me and whatever." But actually, I realized how wrong it is when he answers saying that owning 10% of something extremely good rather than 100% of something what might not work is pointless. So after that, I was like, you know what? I'm looking for a co-founder. I'm looking for somebody who might help me in some points that I'm not really good at. And if all of this together will help me achieve my dream and will help other people, why not? Let's do it.
Yeah, I
So
love that.
has been great.
As the saying goes, if you want to go somewhere fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. And I think the rules are really changing here when it comes to ways of working, ways of approaching entrepreneurship. All right, Thomas, I'm going to jump back to you. What were some of the things that surprised you most from the interview that you didn't know about before?
I mean, I struggled with this question a little bit because I have lots of opinions already. But I think the main thing that sort of I pulled out from this was I actually didn't realize he had considered being a politician.
What is the easiest way, in theory, to fix it? Become education minister or get into politics and affect change from inside the system that's meant to work for the people, right? So then I hired a political advisor to tell me how do I get elected? How does it work? And wow, what a cesspool! Like I got the complete insight into how it all works, and it is just awful.
I find it so ironic a lot of the time that people who like Simon's opinions in the podcast, they're so close to getting it, but they still completely miss the net. Like, so what I mean by that is he understands how the two-party system works, right? And he understands that, like, you know, to become a politician, it's more about making false promises so that you can get the career, and then you can try and change things. But that's a very, very two-party view. And his whole sort of like, he hasn't spoken to anyone who actually wants to solve the problem. Well, if you're only speaking to Tories and Labour, then I don't really know what he expects. This is the problem: is like the last 100 years, politicians haven't changed the education system. Well, maybe if we consistently keep voting in the same two parties that are so similar, then perhaps if we voted for someone else, then you wouldn't be so frustrated. And I find that really frustrating as someone who started in politics, human rights, and international relations, and
Yeah.
came into business, whereas he's started in business and got into politics and being like, oh, the political system's broken. And I'm like, well, it's broken because you won't look beyond two parties. You know, there are other parties, there are other politicians who do stand by their values. Jeremy Corbyn left the Labour Party to become an independent MP because he stands by what he believes in. The Green Party, they believe in what they say and they follow up with that. And, you know, he doesn't talk about that.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting with that is that I think it's really interesting that he tried to go into it. I like that he did that. I get annoyed that people give up with politics just because they sort of look at the two parties and then don't go on. But I think what's really interesting is that there's this sort of disenfranchisement or disillusionment with politics with people like Simon. But I don't see crowds of people at Glastonbury singing Elon Musk or Simon Squibb's name, right? But you do hear them chanting Jeremy Corbyn. And I think that's the power of politics. That's the power of politicians, is that business, it's good, you can be inspired by them, but you're not going to go and share their name in a crowd full of people. Whereas 250,000 people in a festival will chant a politician's name if they believe that he's representing or she's representing them properly. So I was surprised that he got into it, but I was let's say not so surprised that he took the opinion he took.
As someone who knows much more about politics than I do, and the thought that comes up for me is the dismissiveness around other parties.
Yeah.
I would imagine is round to the probability of actually affecting that change.
That's a fallacy though, because like yes, we have a voting system which weighs heavily in favor of two parties, but the majority of people align their views more commonly with not those two parties. So if you actually did a test, most people in the UK would align closer with the Greens, Liberal Democrats. Of course, you've got a portion of the population who will align with people like Reform or whatever, or UKIP back in the day. But the interesting thing is that they think, well, if I vote for them, then I'm automatically letting one of the two main parties I definitely don't like get in. But if everyone thinks like that, then, well, of course that's going to happen.
Right,
but
right.
if everyone changed that mindset and went, well, actually, I'm going to vote with what I align with values-wise, what I believe in needs to change in politics. If Simon voted for what he believes should change in the education system, he'd be voting for Green or Liberal Democrats. But he won't look beyond those. So I think like the political system has done a brilliant job at making us believe we have two choices and that's it. But in all honesty, if you want to see change within a system, then you've got to be willing to take a risk, which is ironic, right? We're willing to take a risk for business, but we're not willing to take a risk with who we vote for. Like, come on, get real, dude.
So linked to that is Simon Squibb is not the first entrepreneur who I've interviewed who's also considered going into politics.
Yeah.
And he's also not the first to have tried and given up.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, this is not my world. My world is definitely much more on the business side of things. It does your take on it, I wonder if that kind of offers more hope to actually say, do you reckon like if Simon Squibb were to reattempt, but going at it at a different angle, he'd affect the same amount of change? Or, you know, the question I asked him was actually, are you affecting more change by having this huge following? He's now got however many millions on TikTok, right? Like one of the posts that I put out, the captions was, you know, today's leader isn't in parliament, they're on TikTok. So I think it's also like, what games do you want to play to win? Whether, you know, regardless of like, okay, is it the specific political party or is it politics in general?
Yeah.
Are we actually having more impact and affecting more change through business or through social media? Danielle, sorry, I want to come switch over to you here as well now. You met him in person at Ideas Fest in Glasgow, which is amazing. How was that? What was your interaction like? And I'd love to hear sort of how he compared to you in real life versus the online and the interview I did with him.
Yeah, and it wasn't kind of planned. I kind of didn't go. I actually didn't realize he was speaking. I got some tickets for 2 days because it's quite local to me. And I was just kind of walking around and I saw that he was speaking. So I thought, okay, because I've not been following him for a massively long time. I feel like he's someone that's coming up everywhere now and everyone keeps talking about it. So I didn't really know too much really. And I just kind of joined at the back and listened to what he was saying. And he actually came across really well, very engaging, very charismatic. You know, the audience absolutely loved him. And then when he finished speaking, he just had the biggest queue of people afterwards. Trying to speak to him. And I don't know how many of them were trying to pitch to him to potentially get some money. But do you know what? I just thought I was with another lady, and we were chatting away, and she wanted to queue up to get a photo for her grandson, or so she was saying. And I was like, I'll just join her in the queue. And then you know, sometimes we're in Glastonbury and you're queuing for the shower or something, and you're there for 4 hours, and you're like, I can't leave now because I've been here for 4 hours, but I kind of want to go. So I was in the queue with her, and I actually ended up speaking to him, and kind of didn't really know what I was saying, but just started talking about my business and the crowdfunder that I did, and kind of taking that risk with that. And although he had so many people waiting, he was one of those people that just took the time to listen to you and what you were saying, and seemed really interested and engaged. And even though there were, you know, people kind of hurrying him up, he wanted to take that time, and I genuinely felt like he wanted to help actually each person that was there. He just came across like a really nice guy. I felt
that's a hallmark of a great leader, isn't it?
Yeah, he made you feel like you're important, your idea mattered, what you were doing mattered. And then I ended up pitching to the doorbell thing that he has completely unplanned. But yeah, I just got that impression from him that he made everyone feel like they had a real buzz about them afterwards, that they were going to go and do this thing, because
Love that.
he does really well, gives people that self-belief that they don't necessarily have in themselves.
Yeah,
that's like one thing he can kind of give
we need to come back to this point on the modern day Messiah. Let me just put a pin in that in my mind there for a second. Just on the doorbell, can I just check with the rest of you, are you familiar with Simon Squibb's doorbell? Yeah,
I am not.
You're not, Thomas. All right, Cosmin, not it. So I just have to share, because I just find this hilarious. I was catching up with a friend of mine the other day, and she's also got an idea. She's got this dream business that she wants to do. And immediately I came out and I was like, you have to ring Simon Squibb's doorbell. No clue. No clue. I mean, also, like, if you don't know, if you've never heard of Simon Squibb before, who also, like, as big as we think he is, there are still people who've never heard of him before. So he's got this kind of odd surname, and you just randomly come out with, like, you know, Mr. Squibb's doorbell. It's just like, what the hell are you on about? Like, you're in this, like, yeah, what drugs have you taken? So Thomas, and for any other listeners who aren't aware of Simon Squibb's doorbell, just to bring you up to speed, did you see about the staircase that he bought? He bought a staircase in Twickenham. Okay, fine. There's literally just this like abandoned staircase, if I'm not mistaken, that was for sale, and he bought it at an auction for like £20,000, I think, and it did make the news. Like, it was on BBC and Sky News, whatever. may have been a slow news day, where he bought the staircase. It was literally just the staircase, and it was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. We'll figure it out later. Which again definitely links back to, like, if you've got money, it's a tool to do this kind of stuff. And loads of people, and it was actually a really nice kind of creative project where, because he's got such a community now where people were suggesting ideas, what he could do with it, all these like fabulous ideas, because it's quite a tall kind of, there's like, I don't know, 6 kind of stories or something, so like you could do like a pop-up at each level or something. Anyway, what he's done with it is he's installed a doorbell linked up to a little camera, and people go and pitch and they record, and then he uses that as more content to share on social. He'll sometimes use it to like fund different ideas. So it's just, it's kind of like, yeah, Dragon's Den in a doorbell. So Danielle, you obviously already knew about it. Did you go to the doorbell after having spoken to Simon?
Yeah, he
Years
told me to
first?
go and
Told
speak
you
to
to go and do
him
it.
afterwards. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think you were saying, Cosmin, about co-founder. I've always been kind of back and forth about co-founder, because I was like, this is my idea, and I don't know if I want to necessarily like give it away to anyone, but I desperately need actually some help with this. I need someone who's got skills that I don't have, and he actually suggested, he suggested investor co-founder. You know, it's like, life's too short. You know, you can't do all this on your own. You've got a young family. You know, you need, and he offered to share. If I put the job spec up, he'd offered to share it. But then he said afterwards, go and pitch the doorbell. But I didn't have a plan or a script. I don't even know what I said on the doorbell, to be honest. He had this live recording on the phone that you had to pitch to, and like, oh, I could just see all these people joining. There was like thousands of people on this live, and I was like, oh my god, this is horrible. I actually had someone message me afterwards to say they saw my pitch on the live and they just wanted to connect. They were doing something similar in Wales, and we had a similar kind of ethos and stuff. So, you know, it's anything like that is nice, isn't
The
it?
power of connection, isn't it? That is amazing. I love that. That's such a hugely valuable aspect that he brings to the table as well. All right, I'm going to unpin that point before about kind of our modern day messiah on TikTok. Cosmin, going to come over to you on this front. What is it that that attracts you to Simon Squibb and kind of makes him kind of feel like, you know, a leader that you trust, one of believing? Kind of what appeals the most to you, Cosmin?
I think only because obviously the type of personality he is, because he's a character.
And I want to build a platform bigger than LinkedIn. Why would I build just a Simon Squibb social media channel? That's boring. You know, it's too small. You've got to think big. And if you do, you'll be free.
The way how he speaks and the way how he engaged with everybody, with his sensibility to put himself lower or higher with every single person what he meets, and that's really, really brilliant. But it's more the fact that, look, one person can do all of this, can move so many waves, and he's so brave and so brilliant. You know, why not admiring him? Why not trying to listen to him? Why not trying to get something out of him? Only because, you know, if you wouldn't have that tough age, you know, from 15 and upwards, and, you know, trying to sort all of these issues and being in that situation. And I think now it's kind of a way of giving back something to the society, I think. And this might be only me, but every single time when he walks up to those streets, wherever it would be, New York or China or Tokyo or London, wherever that might be, I think for some reason he's trying to find himself in the past. Because let's don't forget that he grew up on the street, so it's brilliant. He must have such a tough brain and tough resilience to do what he's doing. It's not for everybody. Other people might have said, you know what, I made my money, that's it. You know, I'll look after my kid. I will invest all of my attention in my kid, and I will have a beautiful family and everything. But I'm sure he takes a lot of time from his personal time to do this and try to help others without having anything in exchange. So
yeah,
you know, you have to be stupid to don't idolize and, you know, don't look like at somebody like that, like a hero. No chance.
On that, I like that you say kind of hero, because something that has also been rattling around in my mind is this past Monday he hosted a big networking event which I couldn't make, and Danielle, I saw that you saw it afterwards, and would like to go as
I
well.
didn't know it was happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, right? It's funny, isn't it? Like you can still have all this following and all this advertising and kind of miss this stuff. But the post that he shared straight after this event was really interesting. It's where it really got me thinking because he was very much like, amazing event. We were just talking before about the power of network and connecting and just putting you on the live, Danielle, and someone else reaching out to you, which is fantastic. That's his goal, that's his mission, that's really to get the value. But back to this post, he was like, it was an amazing event, super energizing, loved it. And it was like, but there's still a problem here, which is linking to this whole kind of modern day Messiah piece, which is people are still queuing up for hours and waiting to speak to him at Ideas Fest, going to Box Park Wembley. They're going on his live. They're still following this one individual. And for all of the lovely things that you're saying, Cosmin, he's a character, he's charismatic, he's got all these wonderful appeals. He is still one person. And he's trying to remove him as a bottleneck with HelpBnk, with his other platforms and everything else. But I don't know, I'd love to get your thoughts open to the panel here, all three of you as well, around how we can help ourselves as entrepreneurs as well, right? I think that there's a distinction between following somebody like Simon Squibb for inspiration and taking away some lessons and using that inspiration to pursue your dream, whatever that is, versus that deep desire that I think all of us have for a leader, someone to follow and have this messiah and have that one person to get those answers from. So Thomas, I can see you kind of like nodding your head on that as well. What are your kind of thoughts?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree, firstly, with like everything that's sort of been said about it being really impressive. He could have just like made his millions and walked away, but he really wants to help people, and I think that's definitely shown, and I think that is very admirable. I think you're absolutely right though. Like idolizing one person's advice as a founder is a terrible idea. Like you want to listen to lots of people basically, and then you want to digest what comes up a lot, and you want to work out what is most relevant to your situation, because every single company and every single founding journey is completely different and you'll experience completely different things. Now, of course, there are learnings that we can take from other founders, and you absolutely should do that. But one founder is not all founders. I remember recently a sort of parallel situation where Paul Graham of Y Combinator posted about founder mode. And the whole startup world just like lost their shit. They're like, forget everything like founder mode is it. It's like, if you're not in founder mode, then what are you doing? You should be. And I was just like, you completely misunderstood what founder mode is, firstly. But also, secondly, like, why are you listening to, yes, a very impressive guy who has, backed some of the best companies in the world and had lots of insights. But that shouldn't mean that you drop everything that you believe with conviction is right for your company just because one other person says that it's not. And I think this is for first-time founders, particularly when you first start building your board of advisors, your board of advisors aren't there to tell you how to run your company. Your board of advisors are there to give you advice on how to run your company, and then for you to be in founder mode, make the decision which is best for your company.
Yeah.
So I think if you could get one advisor being Simon Squibb, and I'm sure you could learn so much from this guy. And equally from Paul Graham and Stephen Bartlett and all of these idols in the industry. Interestingly, how they're all met.
I love so much that you bring up founder mode as well, Thomas. And I can feel myself getting excited on this front too, because what brings to mind for me is if I'm completely honest, there is a bit of annoyance. I do wonder how viral that blog post would have been if it weren't written by Paul Graham.
100%.
And sure, it's about a Brian Chesky event. And of course, Brian Chesky, phenomenal, achieved like sublime, wonderful achievements with Airbnb. So like definitely like super validated. But I think it's just such an interesting point that you raise on whether it's advisors, TikTok messiahs, these people that we're following and then like who we choose to invest in, who the bank choose to give the mortgage in. I'm just sort of seeing this theme across all these various topics that we've spoken about. It goes back to that same thing again of trusting someone who has all of that success when really we need to think about what's the resourcefulness, what's the scrappiness, what's the grit, what are all these other ways that you've actually achieved that versus where you were born, the time that you were born, and what genitalia you were born with, right? That sets you up.
I
Yes.
also think it is like it needs to be relatable to you. Like there are definitely business takeaways we can take away from all of these people, but if you're a black lesbian woman, like, and then you're listening to Simon Squibb's journey of becoming a millionaire through building an agency, and then a lot of stuff can be learned from that, but is his story as a white straight man relevant to your story, like going through that? And similarly, like you might be building like a consumer facing vehicle marketplace, and you are listening to the advice of someone who built a marketing agency. Like they are very different companies with very different ways of growth and different clientele, and like we shouldn't always just listen to successful people because they're successful. We should listen to people who are relevant to our own goals and journey as well.
Yeah.
That's not to say that we should dismiss those people. It's just taking everything with diversity, a pinch of salt, and then bringing it back to, look, you're the founder, you know your company, your sector best, you should anyway. So therefore you can digest that and then put out the best parts of it rather than taking all of it on board.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. All right. Couple last questions from me here. One, I want to bring up the topic around uh money and fear, right? So we were saying before about, oh, just ask Simon Squibb for like £10,000. There was that really interesting anecdote. I don't know if you all got a chance to listen to it in the interview where he shared that he actually offered somebody £50,000.
I offered them £50,000 to make their dream happen, and they were so scared they didn't do it.
I know personally, I've got so many first degree connections who I could imagine being that same person who still wouldn't go for it and would still come up with all these excuses and have all these other fears that get in the way. I'm going to come over to Danielle on this one. Do you have any reflections on that point? I guess it kind of links back to the fear factor and being forced into entrepreneurship sometimes. But did you have any thoughts on that story in particular, where like it takes more than just money to like set up a business?
Yeah, definitely. And I think I mean I couldn't relate to that one because I would have started off it. I was
Give
like,
me the
what?
money.
I still got this money. Could I like step in and do my own one? Yeah, I found that I get it because I probably would have been that person. Potentially 15 years ago maybe. But I definitely think it takes so much more than someone giving you the money, because that's the easy part.
It's
Like
easy, isn't it?
what you
Yeah.
do, it's what you do with that afterwards. And um that I think that's self-belief when we were saying like him just giving you that, if people don't have that self-belief in that self and they think I can't do this, sometimes it takes is one person to go, you can do this, like you can do, and they could get so far, but then they've got to still continue that. So unless they're going to carry around sometimes in their back pocket, which could be another idea he has, money sometimes isn't enough. You need so much more. That you need a support network around you, you need to have that belief in yourself, you need other people to have belief. So as much as I would have snapped that up, it's not as easy as that, I think, for some people. You've got it, it's like what 99% of running business is your mindset, isn't it? And that drive that you have. So yeah.
How about you, Cosmin? Would you have taken the £50,000 if Simon had offered it?
I think the real question is not if I will take the money or not, because come on, with all of us being here with the mindset of what we have, of course we need. What I think we have to remember also is the fact that not everybody was born to be an entrepreneur, as takes so many sacrifices, and you have to be willing to, to do so many things. Let's be honest, some people, they're just happy with the way as they are. They're happy with their 9 to 5 job. We have to accept that. There's nothing wrong with that. That's something also we have to remember, because it seems like Simon Squibb is running about after everybody, making sure everybody will become entrepreneurs. But I think he's just running after those who wants and who is willing to do the step. So, nothing wrong with a 9 to 5 job. We have to respect that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I want to throw that over to Thomas, just because I know that you've also got some thoughts on that. I can see you nodding. Can or should everyone be an entrepreneur, Thomas?
It's my least favorite part of everything that Simon Squibb does is that he just has no respect when someone says, I don't want to do it. And that can be for lots of different reasons, right? Like, yes, it could be because they don't understand or don't have the money or don't have the rest, but also they could just not want to do that. Like my partner, for example, is a brilliant, smart, mission-driven, super hard worker, and she absolutely does never want to be a doesn't want to be a startup founder. She's quite happy working like in an industry and changing that industry. And I just like I really respect that. I think that you're absolutely right, Cosmin. We need to be able to go, it's not for everybody. And that's again, I also think that there is a huge fundamental difference, which is never spoken about in startup world, which is, do you want to build a startup or do you want to build a small business? Because they are different things. And for most entrepreneurs or people who think they're entrepreneurs, they want to build a small business. They want something which will provide for their family. That's really why they're doing it. Yes, there might be some purpose behind it, but primarily it's because they want to just be able to work for themselves and set something up. And that's totally okay. But we need to be willing to go, well, you're not a startup then. A startup is naturally by its name and by its existence something that is there for scale, for larger impact, to move the needle of an industry, to often go on to raise considerable amounts of money, although not always. And I think that we just need to be able to have that rhetoric. One thing that I think Simon does well is that he doesn't say, "Do you want to start a startup?" He he doesn't say that really. He just says, "What's your dream?" And then can we make it become real? And is that a business? And everyone can be an entrepreneur, everyone can be a business owner. But he doesn't necessarily say everyone can be a startup founder, which I think is good because that's you definitely shouldn't be encouraging that.
Yeah.
And I think just finally on the point of, as Cosmin says, like a lot of that just comes down to like a lot of people aren't born with those traits. Like I think that it's okay for us all to be different, and it's okay for some of us to be a bit crazy and have that fire in our belly and like be willing to be a startup founder. And it's okay for others to be born with a bit more like want for comfort and a bit more risk aversion. That's totally okay. But like you need to know know where you should know where you want to belong rather than feeling like you have to do what the industry or what these people, what these messiahs are telling you to do, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's just be comfortable with who you are.
I wholeheartedly agree. More so on the previous point, which we'll get into in just a sec as well. But on that last point, I think, Simon's message is like it's all teachable. So whether or not whatever traits you're born with, but I think the question really goes back to, do you even want it, right? Like there is neuroplasticity, there is all this advice. We're in the information age, but you've got to want it in the first place.
It's also sorry to interrupt, but it's also just not all teachable. Like that's such BS, like in my opinion.
So
I
what
think
do you
that
think is not
you
teachable?
you can learn about the foundations of building a business in the structure and the like theory of building a business, but you can't teach someone to be a founder. You can't teach someone to think like a business owner. Like that mindset, that way of thinking, that fire, that drive, that is an inherent thing that people have, they do not have. And you can be passionate about things, but that doesn't make you be able to be a founder or an entrepreneur. And I don't say this to stop people wanting to become, because I think that try it for God's sake, like go out there, give it a shot. But I just think that like we need to be willing to accept that some things like that are just like part of you in your DNA. You can't teach these mindsets. You can teach the fundamentals of business, sure, like cool, go and learn it. But like but you can't teach someone to change their personality. Like that's not a thing.
I think there's a lot of people that would disagree with you on that. Can I clarify? Are you kind of saying that one of the things is there a distinction between being passionate about something versus having enough of a fire to drive you sufficiently to build a business?
I think that's one thing, but I'm also stating, and yeah, it is a hot take or a controversial opinion, but I think that you can't teach someone who is inherently not built to be a business owner to be a business owner. You can give them the tools, but yeah, I just think that there are certain things, certain drives, certain like wants, needs, a certain craziness that like
Intuitions as well.
that's that's the word, like intuition. You can't teach intuition. You can teach all the things which can guide intuition. And I think that that's really important to distinguish for founders because you could, yeah, and then that falls into, then do you have a passion? Like, great, that's cool. Do you have a dream? That's great, that's cool. But should you be a founder? Let's, maybe weigh that up a little bit before you dive in.
Okay, I think that I've seen people, yeah, I don't know. I think like neuroplasticity comes to mind. I think that I can see how things are teachable. And I think that like if if there's the desire to want it is the first thing. That's kind of where my sort of read of it, like taking all of these kind of viewpoints. I don't think you can teach someone to want those things. If there's an inherent passion about something, okay, you need to have enough of that fire to drive you to give that energy to succeed, because it is hard. The show, it's called Strategy and Tragedy for a reason, right? Like it is hard. So you need to get through those tough times. But I think my biggest thing as well is that you see so many people out there who seem successful and it's all confidence. And and one of the biggest propulsions for me to go into business was actually working for people who I knew I could run circles around. And that gave me more motivation. It was like, oh, it's because they've got that confidence, got that self-belief. That's kind of the big thing there. Cosmin, I think you raised your hand before.
I had raised my hand indeed.
Go on.
I just wanted to say, obviously confidence helps, obviously knowledge helps, and money and everything. But there are two key values what I think a founder or one of these people who has been, interviewed by Simon should have before saying, yes, I'm willing to take this money and everything. One is the persistence. They have to be persistent in whatever they will accept to do, because if you're not, no way you will be able to succeed. And the second one, what can be also a risk taken, you have to become obsessed with it. Because if you're not obsessed and if your mind is not there 100%, it would be extremely, extremely, extremely hard. I don't want to get into football and things because I don't know anything about football, but luckily, really recently, I heard an interview of Cristiano Ronaldo, and he actually said, "I'm willing to give my body whoever wants to do what I'm doing, but I'm sure not a lot of people will do what I'm doing." He is actually obsessed. After 3 hours of training, he will go home and he will train even more. How the hell, have all of these millions, all of this money? Who does that? And all starting from the brain. And yeah, if you have that in the right place of mind, that's it.
I love that. I love that. And that links back to Thomas, your previous point as well, that I don't want to forget about is that, and I love so much what you talked about before as well, with that distinction also between a startup and a small business. And it's funny because a friend of mine, we were having this rant the other day. Don't know if this is going to get anyone like worked up as well. I cannot stand it. I hate it so much. And someone says that they've read a book when they've listened to the audiobook. For me, it's just a case of like accuracy. And like, I'm not splitting hairs, but I'm just like, you just didn't read it in the same way that you might be listening or watching this conversation. You haven't danced this conversation, you listened to it. You read a book or you listened to an audiobook. So it's you just reminded me of that as well, because it's accurate. It's just startup has wrongly got washed up in everyone has taken their own kind of meanings for it. But exactly to your point, Tom, like it comes from Silicon Valley. It has those connotations of being VC backed, scalable. And I think that there's a big case here, and Simon's kind of on this as well, with like the glamorization of the lifestyle business, right? I want to come back to you as well, Danielle. I know that we're kind of running out of time, so hopefully you can stick with us for a few more minutes here. But I'd love to get your take on, with coming back to Flock here and your business, are you building a small business or are you building a startup?
Definitely startup. Like I want to change the world with it. Like my mission and what I want to do with it is so much bigger than, I mean, sometimes I think, should I just be doing a small business? Like, is this too stressful? But that's definitely not why I set it up.
Yeah.
100%.
I love the quick answer to that. So is that kind of, what's the deeper impact there for you that you'd love to achieve with Flock here?
Just in terms of for the women in my network and that I meet, and just giving them, and I think we spoke about a lot of these messiahs and things are men, and Silicon Valley, and I was in California a few months ago. We've got family out there, and a lot of the tech bros there, and it's I've just got this real kind of innate like need and passion to give women more choice when it comes to where they work from, how they work, the money that they're given for their business, how much that, you know, they're invested in, how much they are listened to, you know, so much more. So I've got like, I always say, like, this is literally just the beginning with what I'm doing for this, but there's so much more that's going to come with it. So, and I think with what you were saying, because about being obsessed with it, I'm literally like, I can't shut my brain off ever from it. And I think that comes from being obsessed with something, doesn't it? And you can't, that's something you definitely can't teach, because you have to be obsessed with something to really want to do all of the crap that comes with it. So yeah,
I love that.
and it's also fine to, I feel like there's this narrative, isn't there, of like, if you're not scaling, if you're not, you know, lifestyle businesses are given such a, you know, oh, is that all you're doing? But why not? Like, if people want to be happy and comfortable and, you know, living a life that they want to live, they don't always have to be doing these big things and getting loads of investment.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
what works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And just from the outside, I haven't had the pleasure of interviewing you deeply, Danielle, and I would love to sometime and learn more about your story. But with the little that I'm sort of seeing from the outside, I love how some of the story you've really shared in this conversation, you sort of said by your own admission that actually the entrepreneurship came from a place of necessity from you at the beginning to now, 40 minutes later, hearing about, no, actually it's awakened this fire in your belly and this desire to have this like bigger impact, which I'm totally with you on. Just to very briefly mention, I was listening to Diary of a CEO while I was getting ready this morning, and it was the Andrew Huberman podcast, and they were actually talking about how collaborative and how nice the podcast community is, and they were name dropping, and this is my thing as well, is they were name dropping like all these other like fantastic podcasters, and obvious, and this is, I did, you know, my research a year or two ago as well, and it just completely it was completely coherent with that, with name dropping Lex Friedman, obviously Stephen Bartlett, Joe Rogan, and it's like at no point are you confronting the fact that these are all men. And it's, again, whether it's these big podcasters in like so many different industries, whether it's Silicon Tech Bros, as you're saying as well there, Danielle. And I think, Cosmin, you made an excellent point before about Simon going on the streets and actually subconsciously maybe looking for a younger version of himself. And I saw him do this with the Gymshark situation as well. I don't know if you saw, there was this Gymshark guy. I was like, oh, it's a younger Simon Squibb. It is. And again, it kind of goes back to like, are you going to fault them for that? Like, would I also be looking for a younger Steph and want to support her in her journey? But we just have so many of these loud voices, and so many of, again, Thomas, you're saying before, you know, these cis straight white men, and there's just so many of them that I think that's linking in here as well. This is another reason where you have to take what's relevant and appropriate to you and then adapt it and ultimately make your own decision. Thomas, I think, did you have your hand raised there before? Sorry.
Yeah. It was just like a call on an anecdote
Go on, yeah.
I know an amazing founder who is he was like first team member at a now exited startup. So he's like done really well operationally as like an operator. And he started a startup with the full intention of having a huge global impact of that. And then he's now got 2 kids, I think, one more recent. And he was like, I was just speaking to a contact of mine, and he built a small business, which is not like, and when we say small business, that doesn't mean that he's not a millionaire. Like, this guy has just set up a lifestyle company, which is made him very wealthy, but it's not a startup. And it allowed this guy to like, be with his family, provide for his family, and then go and do loads of charity work. And my friend was basically like, so I've decided to pivot. Like, I don't want to build a startup anymore. Like, I love the idea of having a huge impact, but for me, like, I would rather be able to know that my family is like provided for and I've got all that set up, and then I can then go and just get like hands-on with great impactful stuff on the ground. And I just thought it was just like a brilliant revelation from someone who has been a brilliant startup operator, founder, whatever, to now being someone who goes, yeah, startup life isn't all that great. And actually, lifestyle businesses get a bad rap, but they're brilliant for pretty much all people who think they're startup founders. That would be a better route.
I totally agree with you on that, absolutely. And it's kind of, we don't have time to get into all of this as well, but it does open up another really interesting subject around 9 out of 10 people go into business to be their own boss, to have the freedom. So why would you put yourself, like, create this situation where you've got other people breathing down your neck, other people to answer to? And especially if we look at the VC model, obviously Thomas and I, we've kind of touched on that a little bit before as well. Like, again, this is like, if you break it down and think about it, this is to make already rich people even richer. Chances are they're also going to be the same demographic profile. So like all of that blood, sweat and tears and like working with fast-paced scale-ups, it's so hard. It's so stressful. You're going a million miles an hour. You think, okay, to maybe get an exit at the end of it. And there is an argument to like go and make a load of money and then use that money as a tool for impact. But it's not guaranteed. How long is it going to take? What's the mental, physical price you have to pay along the way? Whereas in the meantime, you could earn a decent living, spend time with your family, go and do charity work. So I definitely think there's a need for having more of that conversation and maybe glamorizing that sort of business model as well. All right, we're running out of time. So I think just lastly, I wanted to give you all the opportunity to share any other like key takeaways, reflections, surprises from the Simon Squibb interview that we haven't already covered.
I have just one quick one, which is that I think he hit the nail on the head when he talks about dreams in America versus in the UK and Europe.
Having a dream is very common in America, right? It's the American dream is very prevalent.
Which is just purely reflective of the entire startup ecosystem as well, how much funding goes in early stage startups, how much risk taking there is. I think that he has identified that at a very individualistic level as well. And I think that you can see that throughout the entire industry. I'd be really interested if there was someone who isn't Simon Squibb to go to China and maybe even some of the Southeast Asian countries, like, and maybe Singapore, and just see like what their mindset to dreams are. I say not Simon Squibb because he seems to have a problem when people don't speak great English. So I think that it would be great to see someone, go to these countries and see if the mindset is similar to America, because obviously their innovation is like booming as well. But I can definitely, it was nice seeing the relation between whole industries down to the individual. Dreams are there, but like harder to get out of people and willingness to take it. Like where in America, it's like a big thing, right? Go to the valley, get funded, try it, fail. Right? That's just like part of the mindset.
I love that. I love that. Thomas, like point after point you're making is just getting me so excited. I don't think a day goes by without the USA coming into the conversation for me as well. So I totally get that. Danielle, Cosmin.
Yeah, I was gonna say, does that come back to education again then? Because like we've got Family America, it's just a whole different culture, isn't it, in terms of how they go through education and that belief, that confidence that they seem to have, and that they can do anything that they want to do. We don't. They lose that after they go to nursery. We like beat it out of them.
The confidence to not know any geographical locations other than America. That's
yeah.
But they still have it. They have that belief. We don't have that. They literally, and it is very. I agree with him in that it's broken. It's I know lots of people that work with young people and getting those kind of entrepreneurial skills out of them. They're amazing, and I think because they take, they're curious, they take risks, they learn through play, and they have, they're amazing. They're like, I feel like actually personally we have it as kids, and then we just lose it as we get older. Some of us get it back, but I think education, that's how we're brought up, has a massive, and what we're supposed to be and supposed to do, and the expectation that's brought upon us. So I think that has a huge impact.
So the solution here, I think we've got the beginnings of a new political party to reform the education system that isn't in the current two-party system, to help.
Oh, there are other parties.
to help export more entrepreneurs. Yeah, exactly. Cosmin, did you have any other thoughts you wanted to share before we wrap up here today?
Yeah, I also like his take on risk philosophy. The way he said it, that the more risk you take, the luckier you get.
Yeah.
I think that was actually really cool and made my brain just start processing everything. And I think that was something to reflect on. Obviously, it has to be calculated risks because otherwise we are just driving a car during the night without lights. But yeah, it's something to think about.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on like
Mm.
how can we actually put that into practice though? Like how can we actually, it's one thing to say we need to be more risk takers, but what are your thoughts on, okay, how do I do it? What does that actually mean?
The way how my brain works, I think it's a little bit easier for me because I'm an overthinker and I'm thinking like already 10 steps ahead every single time. So I'm doing a lot of risk assumptions in my brain and I already can see what is happening and if will happen, what I should do. So yeah, I'm not willing to take risks and in terms of myself works in my favor. And if that the universe want, I would like to get more lucky as well.
Nice, nice. I love that. Thank you all so much for your time. I always wish I had like many hours to get stuck in because there's so many excellent like talking points and hot takes and everyone's got their own kind of different opinions on these different things, which is awesome. All my favorite subjects. So I felt so energized, love this conversation. I really hope that you listening in as well, that you've enjoyed this. If you've also got any hot takes, opinions, let us know, leave a comment. I'm very, anti-cancel culture as a podcaster, as a creator. I want to do the opposite. I want to encourage more conversation. I want to encourage more openness and discussion. So you will not be cancelled unless it is legitimately cancelable. If you've got any opinions, thoughts, ideas, like please share them. We'd love to hear from you. Danielle, Cosmin, Thomas, thank you all so much for your time. It's been so lovely to see you all as
Thank you.
well. So really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Take care,
Thanks,
everyone.
Stephanie.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.